If your last blood test came back and your doctor said your sugar is fine, I want you to actually look at the number, not the comment, the number. Because here's the thing, in my clinic, I see this almost every week. A patient walks in with a fasting glucose of 88, sometimes 92, sometimes even 95. All of that is technically inside normal range. Their doctor looks at it, says everything is fine, and moves on. But when I run the test that actually matters, fasting insulin, the picture changes completely. And by the time we add the full picture, what we are often looking at is someone who has been insulin resistant for years, maybe a decade, with a glucose number that never told them anything was wrong. So today, I want to walk you through exactly why this happens, what's actually going on inside your body when this is the case, and the specific markers beyond fasting glucose that you should be asking for. Stay with me, because this is one of those topics where standard test genuinely is not enough. Let's start with what fasting glucose actually measures. It's a snapshot, one single number that tells you how much sugar is floating in your bloodstream after roughly 8 to 12 hours without food. Your body is extremely good at protecting that number. Glucose regulation is one of the most tightly controlled systems we have because too much sugar in the blood is genuinely dangerous. It damages blood vessels, the nerves, the kidneys, the eyes. So your body has backup systems upon backup systems to keep that number in range. The main backup system is insulin. When your cells start to resist insulin signal, meaning they don't respond to it as easily as they used to, your pancreas does the only thing it knows how to do. It produces more insulin, more and more and more. And for a while, that works. The extra insulin forces glucose into the cells. Your fasting glucose stays in the 80s or low 90s, and on paper, everything looks fine. But here is what that normal number doesn't show you. It doesn't show you how hard your pancreas had to work to get there. Two people can have the exact same fasting glucose number of 90. One person's pancreas produces a small healthy amount of insulin to get there. The other person's pancreas had to produce 2 or 3 times as much insulin to get the same result. Same glucose number, completely different metabolic story, and only one of those two people is actually healthy. This stage has a name in metabolic medicine. We call it compensated insulin resistance. Your cells are resisting insulin, but your pancreas is compensating by producing extra, enough to keep glucose looking normal. And this compensated period isn't short. Research consistently shows that this state can go on for years, in many cases 5 to 10 years, before fasting glucose starts to drift upward into the pre-diabetic range. Think about what that means practically. If you are only checking fasting glucose, you could be 10 years into insulin resistance with all the downstream effects that come with chronically elevated insulin, and your annual blood work will keep telling you you are perfectly fine. And chronically elevated insulin isn't a quiet, harmless thing happening in the background. High insulin levels are directly linked to weight gain, particularly around the abdomen, to high blood pressure, to abnormal cholesterol patterns, especially high triglycerides, to fatty liver, to PCOS in women, and to an increased risk of certain cancers. Insulin is one of the most powerful hormones in your body, and when it's chronically elevated, it affects almost every system you have. So the question becomes, if fasting glucose can't catch this early stage, what can? There is a handful of markers that, when looked at together, can pick up insulin resistance years before fasting glucose ever moves. Most labs in Nigeria can run these, and most of them are not expensive. The first is fasting insulin itself, and it is hardly ordered unless you specifically ask for it. A fasting insulin above roughly 8 to 10 microunits per milliliter, even with a perfectly normal glucose, is often an early sign that your pancreas is working over time. The second is the hormonal IR calculation, which combines your fasting glucose and fasting insulin into a single ratio that estimates insulin resistance directly. I'll be doing a full breakdown of hormonal IR in another video, because this is one calculation done with two numbers you can get from a single blood draw. Is one of the most underused tools we have. The third is your triglyceride to HDL ratio. This comes from a standard lipid panel, something most people had already done, but almost nobody calculates this specific ratio. If your triglyceride divided by your HDL is above roughly 2 in the unit used here, that's a strong signal of insulin resistance, even when both numbers individually look acceptable on their own. And the fourth is simply your waist circumference, tracked over time. This isn't a lab test, but it's one of the most practical early indicators we have, because visceral fat, the fat that accumulates around your organs, is both a cause and a consequence of rising insulin levels. I want to bring you back to what I say in my practice, because this isn't an abstract international statistics to me. It's the pattern I see in patients almost every single day. Many of the patients who come to me have already had blood work done elsewhere, fasting glucose normal, sometimes even HbA1c normal, and they've been told there's nothing to worry about. But when we look closer, fasting insulin elevated, triglyceride to HDL ratio elevated, waist circumference creeping up year on year, the picture is completely different from what the first report suggested. And this matters even more, given how our diet has shifted over the past 4 or 5 decades. The combination of refined carbohydrates, sugar-sweetened beverages, and a more sedentary lifestyle in many of our urban centers has created exactly the conditions where the compensation period plays out quietly for years behind a fasting glucose number that never raises an alarm. The good news is this: because this stage is largely driven by diet and lifestyle, it's also one of the most responsive stages to intervention. The earlier you catch it, the less you need to reverse it. So here's what I want you to take away from this. The next time you are getting your blood work done, whether that's at your annual checkup or just a routine panel, ask specifically for a fasting insulin alongside your fasting glucose. The cost is relatively modest, and the information you get from it is, in my opinion, far more valuable than the glucose number on its own. If you've already had blood work done recently, and you have both your fasting glucose and your lipid panel, you can actually do a rough check yourself right now. Take your triglyceride, divide it by your HDL. If that number is above 2, that's worth discussing with a practitioner who understands metabolic health, even if every other number on your report says normal. And if you want to go a step further, in the next video, I'm going to walk you through the hormonal IR calculation in detail, how to calculate it yourself. what the numbers actually mean, and why this one calculation can actually predict diabetes risk years before it would otherwise show up. A normal fasting glucose is good news, but it's not the whole story. And now you know what else to ask for.